We're going to talk about flags today. It's Flag Friday. Flag Friday. Hang on, my phone's going off now. That's my phone It's not actually reminding me to stream. It's reminding me to go on another stream later, but never mind. So, actually, I'm going to start off with Mark's comment because this is related to it. So, for those who don't know, by the way, particularly if you're overseas, there's been a bit of a spate of flags recently. And absolute comedy from the thick racists. But they've been people have been spraying, particularly St George's flags, which is the flag of England. St George's Cross is used for a number of countries, but it's an English flag as well. And on pavements and roads and roundabouts and stuff. And so yeah, Mark said there, saw a nice post showing how someone sprayed welcome and a love heart over a graffitied St George's Cross in Doncaster, apparently. I've not seen that, actually. I might have to look that up. Not one to encourage vandalism, but... Well, I would say the but here is, so, what is the issue with it? In terms of the cost to the taxpayer, it's the fact it will have to be cleaned up. So the council will have to send someone out to clean it up. Now, what I would say in this case is that... if you're someone's got to send someone out to clean it up, right? If you paint on top of the if you graffiti the graffiti, does that actually increase the cost of removing it? I'm going to guess probably not. Most of the cost of removing it, you've got some chemicals, you've got the person to do it, spending their time. So I'm going to suggest if you graffiti the graffiti, that's probably not. It's not costing anything extra. If it would be marginal extra. So I approve of that. And until the council do clean it up, I approve of the fact that you're putting that message there. Because the people who are painting these flags, they're not doing it out of any sort of patriotic fervour. In fact, they're doing it, it's anti-patriotism. But I'll come on to that in a moment. So I'll actually before I start, I'm actually going to have to do questionable sanities there. Saying, I noticed Supertansky had a Union flag on her live show yesterday, which was upside down, not sure if it was deliberate. You see, yes, it is deliberate. She has done it deliberately. Interestingly, I asked her yesterday, if any of the gammons had pointed it out. She said no. Said several people have pointed it out, but not the thick racists, right? They haven't got a clue. So let's just go through it, right? Because I've got some absolute beauties here. Let us just go through it. That is the Union flag, right? That is the British flag, flag of the UK. This is the anti-Union flag. Now, at first sight, I absolutely get a lot of people could look at either one of them and go, that's the British flag, right? But it's not. The one underneath is upside down. Now, here's the thing. Let's just get rid of the upside down one, the anti-flag. The one at the top. So it can be upside down. Basically, some people think it's symmetrical. It's not. If you look at it carefully, it's not symmetrical. If you look at the left-hand side, the bit of the St Andrew's cross, which is above the St Patrick's cross, is thicker on top, on the left hand side, and then the other way around. So if you don't so much rotate it the wrong way around, but if you flip it, then it can be upside down, right? So you end up with that. And the number of, and what I would say to these skinheads, right, and these fascists, because that's what they are, they're fascists. How can they not know that? I get how an ordinary person, right, you sort of recognise the national flag, but not intimately. Just like in the USA, no one counts the stars to make sure it's accurate. If it looks right, it looks right. Yeah, no one counts the stripes to make sure there's 30. No, if it looks right at first glance, you don't question it, right? But if you're looking at it all the time, if it's your entire life, and these people have got nothing else, this is their entire life. They've got nothing else, nothing at all. They're always banging on about flags. There's always too many flags or not enough flags. Everything for them is the whole state of the country. I don't know why we waste time. The government have all these metrics that they measure. They give data to the Office for National Statistics, and they try to come up with metrics to measure the health of the economy and our health in general, our population. All these metrics for measuring how well the country's doing. Apparently all we need is to count the flags. The flags have to be like a specific number. But I don't understand how people who spend their entire lives with this as their alpha and omega, everything about them is the flag. So how do they not recognise it? How do they not recognise the flag? But here with that, in fact, Goose is just saying there, flying it upside down from a fort used to be used during sieges to indicate distress. Exactly, yeah. Because to an ordinary person, like you just look at it, you're not that familiar with it, you put it upside down, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's just the flag. You don't even see any difference. But to someone in the know, you can tell when it's upside down, right? And yes, it was indeed used to indicate distress, which I think, ask her, just to make sure I'm not misrepresenting her, but I think that's Tan's reason for putting it there. If I were doing it like that, I'd be doing it just to try and catch them out. Because that's why I asked her, when it was upside down, I asked her, how many gammons have spotted it? Apparently none at all. The only people that pointed it out were all progressive, right? But I think the reason she's done it is because it's to indicate that Britain is in some distress. You know, we are being invaded. Well, not invaded, but we are under siege. But not from like a few thousand asylum seekers, but from, you know, a couple of million of skinheads, right? Nazis. But anyway, let's continue because we've got more here. So you've got the Union flag, and then you've got the St. George's Cross. Now this is the flag of England, right? Now here's the thing. I'm going to go through a couple of things here. First of all, why are they doing it? Why do they go out with the flag? Why do they do it? Now, you could argue that it's because all nationalists do it, right? If you look, if you look at photographs from, say, 1930s Germany, just as a little example, flags everywhere. Flags everywhere. And here's another thing. You know why Hitler chose the swastika, don't you? For the symbol of not, because he didn't make that symbol up. It's a Hindu symbol. You can actually see it in stonework in parts of London still, because there was no racist connotations with it at all until Hitler came along, right? So he co-opted it, just like the fascists are trying to co-opt our flag. These are our flags, by the way, not theirs. They're shared. If they're British, or they're English, they're shared flags, but they're not theirs specifically, right? They're ours as well. And so, yeah, but why did Hitler choose the swastika? I'll tell you why he chose the swastika. Because it is symmetrical. And he knew that thick racists will, if you give them even the simplest jobs, they will mess it up. So the only way he could be certain that they wouldn't fly the flag upside down was to make sure it's perfectly symmetrical, right? Union flag, not perfectly symmetrical, right? If it was being designed for thick racists, it would have been. They would have made it perfectly symmetrical, but they didn't. So anyway, St. George's Cross and the Union flag. So why are they doing it? And a lot of people are saying, well, they're doing it to try and intimidate Muslim people. And you go, well, so I asked someone, how does that work then? And I'm not saying the person I asked, who is of that mind, by the way, is the authority on it. I don't think they're an authority on anything. They're not even an authority on their own bloody flags. But I said to them, why do you think this offends Muslims? Because it absolutely does. It's like, it's their flag as well. That's the British flag. That's the English flag. If you've got an English Muslim, both of them are their flags as well. Why would they be offended? And they go, oh, it's because it's based on Christian symbolism. So's Islam. Jesus is a Muslim prophet. So's Abraham. Like, all of the major Christian prophets are also Muslim prophets. Like, it's not offensive to Muslims. It's the skinhead Nazis behind the flag that's offensive. It's the lobbing bricks at a mosque that's offensive. It's not the pissing flag. But anyway, where are we? Yeah, and again, I mean, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, a lot of people thought that the Union... Do you know what the Union flag is missing? Let's just get rid of the St. George's Cross for a moment. Do you know what the... Sorry, I've got the wrong bloody one now. Do you know what the Union flag is missing? Welsh dragon in the middle. I keep saying it. It's mad, isn't it? So we have represented Ireland, Northern Ireland now, Scotland and England in the Union flag, right? It used to be just England and Scotland before Ireland were sort of forced to join. But, you know, we've got those. So it's like, where's Wales? And here's the thing that gets me, right? Someone made this conscious decision. It's like, well, where's Wales in it? Well, they don't have a cross. No, they have a dragon. That's like the coolest part of the whole thing. So someone specifically decided not to include the coolest flag device we have on these sceptred isles for it. Should have a Welsh dragon in the middle, but it doesn't. But I'll tell you what people did think it had 10 years ago. They thought it had a picture of Mo Farah on it, because everywhere you went, basically, where is he? You saw this. That was 10 years ago. If you saw a Union flag, you probably saw a smiling Mo Farah in front of it. He's Muslim. Does he look like he hates the flag? He was always carrying a bloody flag with him. You couldn't keep him away from flags. He would put it down just long enough to win a race, and then he'd pick it up again. Absolutely mad. Anyway, let us carry on here, because going back to the St. George Cross. Now, here's the thing. Here's the good thing about this flag, right? Here's the good thing. Apart from the fact it's a nice simple design, so you can paint it on roundabouts and stuff. Yeah, brilliant. Because could you imagine them trying to paint Union flags on? That would be a bit complicated. So they're having to do this. This is easy, right? You find something that's already white and you put a red cross on it. Or if you can't find something already white, you put white on it and then you put a red cross on it. Easy, piece of piss. And the other good thing about it, you can't fly it upside down. It's brilliant. Only they can. Some fools managed it. Some thick racists actually... How you say? You can rotate it. You can flip it. You will never be able to fly that flag upside down, mate. Yes, you can. They managed it. They absolutely managed it. Let's have a look here. Look at that. They actually managed to fly it upside down. And do you know the thing about this? Do you know what's even more embarrassing about that? How is it possible to fly it upside down? Because it's got England written across it. It's got a word. That's how it's possible to fly it upside down. If you put a word across it, all of a sudden it can be upside down. And here's the thing, right? I'm going to just get rid of these. Let's just go back a minute, right? I get how, in fact, if I get rid of the proper one, if I show that to someone, a lot of people just go, that's the Union flag, that's the British flag, right? It's not, it's upside down. But I get how most people wouldn't recognise that unless you ask them, and even then they might not know. Okay? That's understandable, right? That is upside down. Someone who has never, ever, ever seen an England flag knows that's upside down. How do they know it's upside down? Because as long as they don't even have to speak or read English, as long as they use Roman letters. Not everyone does, so maybe some people in China might not recognise that as upside down. But if you use Roman letters, you know that's upside down. The people who put that there did not recognise that as upside down. That's how thick they are. They not only don't know their own flag, they don't even know letters. They can't read. These are illiterate people, right? Now, someone's just mentioned the Danish flag there. This is next. This is a beauty, this is. Because, look at this. Look at this. Look at this guy here, right? Look at him. He's going out to paint a flag on a roundabout, right? Look at him. He's got a balaclava on. It's a white balaclava. Now, you can tell, because he's got the red thing there. If he was to look front on, he's got a red thing there and one across there. He's made his head look like the St. George's Cross, right? He's made his head look like the St. George's Cross. Out he goes with his roller and his paints. And he's put that on, of course, so he don't get recognised, because he knows he's going out to commit criminal damage. Although I am going to suggest, if anyone knew this man, even with the balaclava, they'd recognise him, because he's got his distinctive tattoos, right? So, you know, he may get his collar felt still. He hasn't bothered to hide distinguishing features, you know what I mean? Or maybe he's not trying to hide his identity. Maybe it's just like Hot Fuzz, he's wearing the balaclava because he's a bit fugly, right? But anyway, so he's going out, and this is what he does, right? He paints this. And you go, mate, that's the Danish flag. It's not a very good Danish flag, I'll grant you. It's a bit, you know, the white, it's not in proportion. And it's not tidy. It's not at all tidy. They obviously did it in some haste. But the point is, it's got a red background and a white cross. And I thought, so when I first saw that, my first thing when someone put this on a WhatsApp group, I said, please tell me that's real, because I didn't believe it. I thought someone's photoshopped that. It's very good Photoshop, but I thought, I don't believe it. Even these thick as mince racists cannot get that wrong. They would not get that wrong, I thought. And no, it is actually real. The thing that convinced me, I mean, everyone was telling me no, the thing that convinced me is it's in the Sun, right? And the Sun would never falsely malign thick racists, right? It's their customers. So if they report on a thick racist doing thick racist things, it must be real, right? That's what convinced me. And I was thinking to myself, if only this man had taken a mirror along with him, like as a self-portrait, he'd have got it right. Because he's got the St. George's flag on his head. And then I saw this. Where is it? Sorry, put that up. He's got a mate. He had a mate with him who also had the St. George's balaclava thing. So it's like they would have looked at each other. They had each other as inspiration. They could see that, oh yeah, white background, red cross. And they still messed it up. Maybe it's a very bad Swiss flag. Yeah, I think the reason people have said Danish flag is probably because it's gone to the edges. Whereas the Swiss flag doesn't. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's certainly closer to a Swiss flag than an English flag. But it's like, how thick are these people? And this is what I mean. You know, they get upset. Like Lee Anderson gets upset when you call him thick. And my response to that is, well, stop being thick then. Like, why do you keep... If you don't say... Like, everyone does something thick from time to time, right? Everyone does it. But thick people do it all the time. Like, if you don't want people to call you thick, stop doing thick things all the time. It's like that Simpsons thing, isn't it? Where you got Homer there, and Lenny's around the corner with all the colleagues going, wait, he's about to do something incredibly stupid. And he wasn't giving any stupid vibes. They just knew that he can't go more than 20 minutes without doing something stupid. And that's what these people are like. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Goose there saying, I would also say there's a long tradition of specifically left-wing English intellectuals being ashamed of Englishness. Insert Orwell quote about them rather stealing from poor boxers there. But it's not many. There's not many like that. You know, I mean, there is a bit of that. I mean, I have said, for example, you know, what should we do about it? What we should do about it is whenever, just go with the flag. It's not their flag, right? They think that flag, not that flag. Right? Should we get rid of this? Because this is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for them. I'm embarrassed for them. Let's put the real ones back up. This is not their flag. It's shared with them. It's theirs, but it's ours as well. And the best way to... here's the thing, this is all seriousness. What should really happen when people go out... Because people will say things like this, oh, they've co-opted the flag. No, they haven't. You can't co-opt a flag unless other people surrender it. Don't surrender it. Don't let them have it. Because those are our national flags. These are the flags you will see at anywhere where Britain or England is represented. Sporting events, most especially with the English flag. On the national stage with the British flag, as well as some sporting events as well. That's a bit mixed. These represent our nations. The Union flag represents the UK. The St. George's Cross represents England. They're always going to do that, right? They're always, as long as these nations exist, that is. They are always going to, we're not going to change the flag, right? So, don't let them have it. Because the far right, the fascists, cannot make those flags represent fascism. It can only be they can't take it. It can only be given to them. So don't give it to them. Don't give it to them. Don't have a situation where, like my next door neighbour, they have a flagpole. They've got the Union flag flying because military people, they like that, right? It's not a fascist. But if someone goes past it and they think, oh, it might be a fascist, don't think that. If you see a St. George's Cross in someone's window, don't think that. Think to yourself, they're just supporting the rugby team, right? That's all they're doing, right? And the way to do that, the way to stop the fascists thinking it's their flag, is fly it. When you go out to a counter-protest, what should have happened when all those racist mugs at the weekend went out to protest against the asylum, the counter-protesters, they should have taken St. George's crosses and Union flags as well. So there is an element of people thinking, oh, I'd better not take this because people might think I'm a fascist. No, take it. Take it in numbers. Imagine what these thick as mince racists would have thought if they had to face off against people with refugees welcome banners and a load of Union and flags and St George's crosses. Imagine what they'd think. They go, hang on a minute, why are they flying our flag? Because it's their flag as well. And in all honesty, that's what we should do. We should make sure we are flying those flags, right? Because they're national flags. And the nation is whatever we want it to be. But anyway. Maisie, they're saying someone should paint something in Denmark there under it. The thing is, someone did actually make a joke, I think, on TikTok about, oh, the Vikings are coming again, when someone had painted the... Because it did, I mean, it doesn't look like the Danish flag. I mean, again, let's put it up again. But if you were to say what flag is that, then the Danish flag is the closest you would come to. And it was like, yeah, someone put a caption on going, oh, the Vikings are coming. But there we are. So sad to see how badly our education systems fail. So many people evidently were allowed to wear balaclavas in class. Well, I mean, it has, actually. Our education system has failed people in that it hasn't taught modern history. You know, when I was learning history, we learnt the Industrial Revolution. We didn't learn the negative, or we didn't learn many. We did learn some, actually, I have to say. But we didn't learn much in terms of the negative impacts of empire. We learnt about the Industrial Revolution as it applied to Britain, with a little bit about trains in America. There wasn't really very much. And there was no modern history being post-Second World War, shall we say. None. So in school, you didn't learn what the EU was. So obviously then it became easier for people to say we don't need it then. We don't learn about human rights and the European Convention on Human Rights, so that is also vulnerable. We don't learn about the real makeup of our society and how it has been for years. Like, how much harder would it be to have anti-immigrant sentiment if, because like lots of Europe is anti-immigration. There are some countries, like, you know, some people look, I mean, I say from an economic standpoint, I say we should actually, never mind looking towards America for inspiration, we should look to Scandinavia. But and for some social issues as well, like countries like Sweden, for example, have a very sensible attitude towards penal policy. So, you know, very enlightened penal system and low rates of reoffending, stuff like that. So there's a lot of things we can learn from Scandinavian countries. I wouldn't suggest multiculturalism as one of them, though, because I've known quite a few Scandinavians gamed with over the years when I've been doing online gaming, and they're not the most enlightened when it comes to multiculturalism. So there's a really strong strain of anti-immigration, and there has been for a long time, from bits of Northern Europe. Whereas in Britain, we are very multicultural, but you always get these elements that are very much opposed to it. They see it as a bad thing. And again, why don't we learn about because people aren't going to be told the benefits of multiculturalism. So why aren't they taught? Yeah, why don't we teach? So our education system from that point of view has let us down, because our education system does not teach Britain. It doesn't teach about Britain. It just teaches like the chocolate box cover of Britain, like, you know, medieval kings and queens and the Industrial Revolution, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and all this sort of, you know, George Stephenson, all that business. It doesn't teach about British culture. We don't teach British culture in schools. We don't teach about, you know, how Britain developed. Britain is a mongrel nation. It is the nation of immigrants. Not as much as America. But, you know, by and large, we've had so much immigration. You know, it's like we are, I mean, that is why we are actually the most multicultural country, I think, in Europe. You know, in a lot of European countries, It's like if you think about something simple that we take for granted, you know, the fact that we have senior political leaders who aren't even white. And we've had a prime minister that wasn't white. I mean, that was for the first time. But this sort of stuff in a lot of other European countries, not all, but a lot of other European countries would be like, it's never happened. And yet we're not teaching the benefits of this multiculturalism. And people aren't going to learn it naturally because they're being taught to hate multiculturalism. No one's teaching them, hang on a minute, let's look at the facts. What's the likelihood Labour will use the attack on UK representatives in Ukraine to bolster their position, as in countries don't vote out governments when they're at war? No, there's no votes in foreign affairs. Yes, you can get a rally round the flag if you are physically being invaded. People are sort of, you know, on Ukraine's side here publicly. They could use it as a wedge with Farah. That's about all they can use it for. It's not a vote winner, I'm afraid. Russia would literally have to invade us for it to be a vote winner. But they can use it as a bit of a wedge with Farage, but it's limited. They know they need to lean into, if people don't feel there's this real emergency from Russia, then they need to lean into things like, you know, the cost of living crisis. The cost of living crisis is the emergency that people do recognise. Even the people who believe that asylum is this national emergency, they sort of, the actual emergency in their heads is NHS, housing, cost of living, jobs, right? So Labour need to lean into those. Those are where the votes are. Those are where the votes are. Liam, they're saying, learn more about Oliver Cromwell than anything else. Oliver Cromwell was very much missed out of my history education at school. Anything I know about Oliver Cromwell came from outside of school. But, I mean, fortunately, history... See, this is another thing where you get this big disconnect, right? Because history is interesting. And history, if you are an intellectual, history, it's very obvious, is relevant to the life as you live it today, right? For people who read and understand and engage in intellectual pursuits, it's very, very obvious that history is relevant to today. And so you are actively motivated to learn about history beyond what you were taught at school. But if you are not into intellectual pursuits, I'm not saying stupid, not everyone who's not into intellectual pursuits is stupid, but if you're not into intellectual pursuits, right, learning, higher learning, you are not going to learn anything about history, are you? Outside of school. That is why it's so that you get this big disconnect between the history as intellectuals understand it and the history as non-intellectuals understand it. And that allows for, because if you have an argument with someone, like a civil argument, a debate, I don't mean like a slanging match. In order to have a fruitful argument, you have to agree on a common reality, which you can only do if you accept the same facts. But the problem is that most of what people think they know about history, if they've not found out themselves, has been delivered through the likes of Nigel Farage, being told lies and given this sort of one-sided view of things, which we got at school. Again, I mean, my history education was very one-sided. Literally GCSE history was the Industrial Revolution. And it was all the positive. There were some negatives in terms of like, yes, okay, it did have the impact of industrialisation on people's health, right? Fossy jaw, stuff like that, you know. But not so much the imperial entanglements. You know, there wasn't really a lot of that. Yes, we were taught that we nicked most of the world, but they didn't really go into detail about what that entailed exactly. So you learn all this stuff later. So what if you don't learn all that stuff later? This massive disconnect between two groups of polarised people who have no common ground. And if you have no common ground, you can't have a useful debate, so you end up just becoming more and more polarised. More and more polarised. And I have to tell you, in this more and more polarized world, the intellectuals do not win because there's not as many of us. Because intellectual pursuits, reading, learning, first of all, having to accept that you don't know enough. That's the first step to learning on your own bat, not being forced to be taught like in school. But the first step to actually finding things out is to understand that you don't know things. A lot of people don't like to admit that they're ignorant, which is how you end up with shit like this happening. Anyway, catch up with the last few questions. Liam, they're saying, being born in 93, I found that a lot of films and cartoons coming out at the time was very much aimed at multicultural, united ways of thinking. Say most of my friends group my age are for it. Yes. Yes, you have... whereas the cartoons I grew up watching were very different. Particularly when you watch like Tom and Jerry cartoons from the 1950s and stuff like that, they were like openly racist. Really quite bad. In fact, when I was, you still had comedians on the telly that were very racist. So there's a lot of racism in Britain. I mean, in the 80s when I was really growing up, which was really noticeably kicked into the long grass in the 90s. I mean, we actually made a lot of progress in the 90s. I'm not saying we were ever in a great sweet spot, but in the 90s and the noughties, social attitudes became way more progressive. Way more progressive. The racists were still there. They were always there. They're in every country, right? It's not that racism in Britain is... I don't know whether it's particularly bad. I strongly suspect it's not. Just on the evidence of the fact that we are very multicultural. But I don't know. But they were still there. They are still there. There's a lot of them. They just knew that... Because people are sheeple, right? People conform. A lot of people conform. And they knew that their views weren't conforming, so they kept them to themselves. Like Bernard Manning disappeared off the television screens. He still carried on his racist comedy, but he did it in his own private club, right? So you could still go there and listen to it. It's not illegal, but he just wasn't welcome on the telly. People knew that those views were not welcome in society. And then the Tories and Nigel Farage consciously, effectively, pulled us back to the 1970s, and that's they're regressing us. They're regressing. Jim Davison's still doing stage shows. I mean, you don't make it illegal, but what you notice is he don't feature that much on the telly, does he? But he was in the 80s. It was in the 80s, and even in the 90s when he was on the telly, like when he did Big Break and stuff, the racism wasn't part of his act then, was it? It wasn't part of his act, but it was always part of his stand-up. I watched a stand-up on telly, actually, Jim Davison, late at night. That was quite racist. That actually surprised me, because I never really watched a lot of Jim Davison. I know he was on the telly in the 80s, but I didn't used to watch it. I watched Big Break because I was a snooker fan, and that was all right. It was fine hosting that. That was fine. And then I watched that stand-up with him, and I thought, what the bloody hell is this? So, he didn't stop he just knew that for a television audience, can't do the racism, you see. That was a sign of just where we'd come. And then we've just thrown it right back into reverse. But anyway, there it is. I shall leave you with that. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of weekend. I have to get myself ready for another stream now. Until next time, I'll see you later.